morning, my name is David Ridgway. Welcome to the Weekly Wind-Up. The Weekly Wind-Up is the premier programme that is issued by Kirklees Local Television. We aim to be interesting, provocative, challenging and entertaining. I have one guest with me this week, Kyle Warwick, who is one of our resident presenters. And this week we're going to do a compilation of news nationally and locally. Kyle, I understand you've shown a bit of interest in the newly announced Tory policy for restricting benefits for tens of thousands of teenagers.
It is something that has come to my attention in the last week, and it's something I have quite strong opinions on. I've been told that there are good points to it, but to me it just smacks of another Tory policy attacking the working classes, really. It allows people who have rich, well-off parents who are able to afford to put them through the period after university or college, where they say to them, okay, we can pay for you, go out and find the job that you want. Whereas working class people will leave work or leave an apprenticeship, let's say, and be told by the company, I'm sorry, we don't have any places here for you to take up a job, so you need to leave. They will then have to go out on benefits and work for 4 weeks before they're even allowed to start the benefit claim. People who don't have rich parents who are leaving university will have to do exactly the same. This just says to me that they're just trying to create a situation where it's extremely difficult for people on lower incomes to get into the workplace.
Well, I do remember when I was much younger than you are now, that everybody coming out of school would do national service, and they went into the services for 3 years. Now, they went into the services as servicemen and they got paid their service pay, but they were 3 years away from doing whatever it was that they wanted to do in university or whatever. 4 weeks in comparison to 3 years doesn't sound like too much, but on the basis that I gather the government is of the opinion that it will raise sufficient revenue to pay for 3 million apprenticeships, is that not a price worth paying?
I would say not, because I think there's a big situation now with apprenticeships where you're kind of getting an inflated pool of apprentices. It's another case of quite similar to what happened with the mill industry, where they claimed that the mill industry, it wasn't skilled labour. They flooded it with people from the local area, so you had lots of people applying for the same jobs, which brought the wages down. The mill economy eventually collapsed, and then now you're coming back around where you've got people who are applying for those jobs and it's classified as skilled labour but still not really paid the same extent as other skilled labour jobs. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Carl, but I'm actually quite interested in this phrase skilled labour, because I've met a lot of people latterly who used to work in mills, people who used to actually do the setting of a warp, to actually do the weaving, and so on and so forth, and even those who were checking the cloth afterwards. And to say that they were not skilled people is actually quite insulting. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, certainly considering the level of danger involved in some of those jobs as well.
You know, not only up front, but of course in the chest as well, subsequently.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they weren't exactly sort of clean places to work, but I mean, they were for a lot of working class people in the region. They were the only job available to them upon leaving school.
And then to give you another counterbalance to that, I can remember travelling in Yugoslavia when Yugoslavia was a country, and it was behind the Iron Curtain at that time, that there were 2 men digging a hole in the road, and there were another 8 men standing around watching. And I gather they were all being paid to dig that hole, and they had no unemployment. Now, is that a good way of going about stuff, or is that massaging figures?
No, absolutely. I think that is definitely massaging figures. But at the end of the day, when you look at industries like the NHS, where you're kind of getting top-down reorganisation of it, where you've got government's saying there's not enough people out there trained in it, that's why we need to get people coming in from abroad, but then at the same time stigmatising migrant workers that are coming to this country. I think there's a lot of completely contradictory policies that are coming out of the Conservative government that are essentially just set up to attack the working classes, really, and stigmatise them.
Do you not think that this imbalance of comment that you just described is not coming from the opposition as well? I mean, what about Ed Balls and his receipts for cash labour?
I think there's, you know, I can't really differentiate between Labour and Conservative anymore. They don't really seem like two separate political entities to me. They seem very, very similar in the way that they operate, and as well, you look at the kind of people that are in the party. They're all kind of this bland, middle of the road, neoliberal Thatcherite politicians that have the same ideals but prance about in different coloured ties, really.
Well, Kyle, we've had a good go at Ed Balls and we've had a good go at David Cameron. Tell me, has Nick Clegg got any place in all of this?
I think as a party, the Liberal Democrats don't exactly do themselves any favours, because they've got in bed with the Conservative Party, and their aim when they did so, or what they stated their aim was to be a moderating factor on the Conservative Party. And it certainly seems like a lot of what the Liberal Democrats have agreed to has been basically going along with the Conservative Party on policy. Certainly centrally, in central government. I think some of the policies from Vince Cable have certainly been, rather than what the Liberal Democrats stated, where they were stating that they were going to bring in more regulations for banking, he's actually facilitated the banking sector to a greater extent. And he's actively, well, he won't come out and actively say that the TTIP deal is a bad thing.
TTIP deal?
Sorry, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is currently being hammered out by the European Union and America, and has a lot of implications for big business, but as well for the average worker. And Vince Cable has not come out openly and said that this is going to be bad for the British people. He's basically allowed it to be backdoored, really, I would say, rather than highlighting things.
Would you say he's kowtowing to the Conservative part
I would
of the
say
government?
So, yeah. I think there's a lot of people in Liberal Democrats who are preparing for the fact that they're not going to get power in 2015. They're not going to get a share of power, and they're looking to get themselves on a Conservative ticket, really.
Can I perhaps just remind you that in the whole of Europe, the one country's economy which is actually motoring forward is the British economy. And I think it would be a fair comment to make that the intrusion of Alexander into the Treasury to restrict the worst excesses of Conservative Party policy, such as you've been describing, that's going to be in their manifesto for a subsequent government with regard to benefit. I think that there is an argument to be said that working with the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats have actually demonstrated a degree of a national support so that we can look to the future, but they have done that at the expense of the future of their potential parties' benefits in the future.
I would counter that by saying that, you know, I hear a lot about the improving state of the British economy, but we still have a situation where big businesses that make big profits are still able to pay below a living wage, which means that people who are working full-time hours are having to claim benefits to top up their wages, which means that the state is propping up businesses for them to pay below the living wage. That is still a situation that nobody is tackling. Everybody keeps saying, "Oh, we're gonna." Well, the Labour have said £8. Liberal Democrats haven't committed to a figure of what they're going to raise the minimum wage by, and that is a situation that is awful to me. It's awful. It's propping up businesses that essentially have pools of money reaching into the billions and allowing them to pay below minimum wage, and then forcing their employees to claim benefits just so that they don't have to pay a living wage.
Do you feel then, Kyle, that on the basis that we've now destroyed the Labour Party, we've now destroyed the Tory Party, and now we've subsequently destroyed the Liberal Democrats, do you think we should all get our purple banners out and start voting UKIP?
That would be the most... I just can't speak to how awful that would be. No, I think there are political alternatives out there, but you cannot claim that UKIP is a political alternative, especially when you consider that it's backed by former Tory backers, led by former Tories.
And indeed former Labour Party member, because there's in the news today, a senior Labour Party official has joined UKIP. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's all political establishment dressed up as new party reform, and they actually have no policies for reform. Which is
exactly the same as it was in the 1930s, so nothing's new.
Nope.
We'll take a break there, and we'll come back and discuss these weighty issues in further depth in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much. Welcome back to the weekly wind-up. Before we came on, we had a brief chat about cannabis, and you said there were certain things about cannabis you didn't really want to talk about. But did you see there was a student in court yesterday for possession in Leeds Crown Court, and he received a community service despite having been accused of possession with intent to supply and vast amounts of cash strewn around his flat. What are your thoughts?
That's not really a surprising or unusual situation to me. I certainly think that cannabis being a Class B drug, if you look at the way that the police handle incidents of possession with intent to supply, the classification of cannabis as a Class B drug is a complete joke, because they never follow up with the sentencing. Not that I think they should. I think that cannabis and sort of all drug illegalisation only creates a worse situation than legalisation.
I have been banging on for a long time that all drugs should be available, not just on prescription, but through licensed outlets, so that government could control the supply and take the criminal element out of it altogether, which is happening in the United States more and more.
Yeah, and I think you look at somewhere like Colorado, where they have a policy that if you have too much tax revenue surplus, then they have to give money back to the people. And because of the amount of revenue that they've earned off cannabis, they're having to give thousands of dollars back to the public.
Sounds
I mean,
good.
it's a crazy amount of revenue that you can have. Another one for me as well is just on this topic is not allowing people to smoke in pubs. Fair enough, having banning orders on smoking in pubs is one thing, but what I think should have happened afterwards is pubs should have been given the possibility to pay for an annual licence to be a smoking pub. They should have had to put a sign up in the window to say, we are a smoking pub. If you serve food on that premises, then yeah, fair enough, you shouldn't be allowed to smoke in it. But if it is simply a drinking establishment, then that pub should be able to pay X amount a year to be a licensed smoking premises, raises revenue, keeps the pub trade going to a bigger extent.
It's interesting, isn't it, to see how these things develop, because I've seen over my long years of 69 years of age, I've seen the development of smoking go from everybody smokes to virtually nobody smokes to anybody who does smoke is a pariah. That smoking in pubs used to be restricted to the smoking room, and it used to say smoking bar on the door, and everywhere else was non-smoking. And then all of a sudden it's no smoking in pubs at all. And now, having broadly won the smoking lobby argument, they're now going on to the drinking lobby. So are we going to have no drinking in pubs soon? Don't answer that, it's okay. Chelsea supporters were filmed in the Metro last night forcing a black man off one of the trains, chanting at him, and obviously being involved in what can only be described as an outrageous racist attack. How much responsibility should Chelsea Football Club take for their supporters when they're on away matches, or at any matches?
I think it's certainly within their own ground there is an increased level of responsibility. I think it's a lot harder when you've got fans going to away games. You're kind of relying on bodies outside of your own club to locate and identify those people, which when this happened in Paris.
Well, if these guys,
I'm not condoning what's happened by
but if
any
these
means.
guys are on CCTV and they've got the supporters club's photographs of the people who are in the supporters club also logged, it shouldn't be difficult to put the two
Certainly,
together.
if that is the case, then I think they do have a responsibility to investigate and if they feel it necessary, then to punish people who... I think racism in football is something that is being dealt with to a bigger extent. It's being highlighted to a bigger extent,
yeah.
But I think it still keeps coming up as a problem.
We must all work to kick racism out of football.
Absolutely,
We must all work to kick racism out of everything.
Absolutely, society as a whole.
Did you notice that Shaheed Mohammed has been arrested? 12 years on the run. He is accused of firing that house in Birkby, where a whole generation, or 3 generations of one family were killed.
I mean, I think it's great news that he's been found, that he's been arrested.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think it's been ongoing for a long time and was massive news, not just here but around the country when it happened.
Indeed it was.
I think that's found its conclusion. It can only be a good thing.
I was going to finish on the World Cup, which is a cricketing affair somewhere down in the Antipodes, but as England has started off so badly, I'm not going to talk about it at all. I do want to talk about the police horse called Brian. Did you hear about the police horse in London called Brian?
The first I heard about it was this morning. It did raise a smile to my face, I must admit.
Well, the police horse called Brian was deemed to be not a strong enough or a manly enough name for a horse which actually gets put into the front line on demonstrations, on football supporting days, etc., etc. And a police commissioner suggested that perhaps Brian should be renamed Hercules or Caesar or something like that. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I mean, there's one particular Brian that I can think of that would have a massive amount to say about that being Brian Blessed.
Correct.
I mean, the man's he's climbed 5 different mountains, 5 of the tallest peaks in the world.
Indeed.
He's played some of the most amazing characters in the world. If that horse had a voice like Brian Blessed's, then there would be no issues at football matches.
Well, there's been a massive international campaign by people called Brian who've actually put in a massive petition online to the Metropolitan Police, and in fact Brian is going to continue to be called Brian, which I think is really good news. Indeed.
Did they have like some slogan that he's not a naughty boy, he's a police horse called Brian or something?
Very
like
naughty, and oof, you'll have the religious police around seeing you. Thank you very much everybody for watching. This is the weekly wind up. See you next week.